of that, I'm going to get to the scriptures and why we're here, all right? So, 3 Puritan doctrines, and I'm going to go through this quickly because we've already studied it. The first doctrine was the sovereignty of God. We looked at that before. We believe that man is created in the likeness of the image of God. We believe that God is sovereign. He is not what the deists say. The deists say, well, God created, but he really hasn't paid much of attention to man. No, we believe that God created, and he is intimately and intricately involved in his creation. Thoughts that go with that, I'm not going to read all the verses, so you have to forgive me. All right, a man's plans and schemes cannot undermine God's sovereignty. So, I may not like everything that's happening in America, but is God sovereign? I always have to go back to that. God is sovereign. Again, we've already preached this, so I'm not going to spend time looking at it. All right, man may choose to live in opposition to God's will. However, no man can live outside God's sovereignty. Can I disobey God? Can I rebel against God's will? And the answer is yes, I can. But listen, that never means that God is any less than sovereign. And many of us could give testimony. We've had things happen in our life, and at the time we thought, Lord, I don't see any good that's going to come out of this. This is just bad, bad, bad. And then we're reminded all things work together for good, right? Or there shall no evil befall thee. Thirdly, men acting outside God's revealed will do not negate his sovereignty. Whether it's a president or it's a governor or it's a dictator or whatever it might be, they cannot operate outside of the fact that God is sovereign. God can set up a king and God can take down a king, right? God can take, as many of us watched a few years ago, where President Trump is speaking in essentially what was a fairground, and could take a bullet and it literally winged his ear. And I look at that and I saw, I mean, how many of us didn't think, wow? And I think I even said in church, it's almost like God went, you know, again. Moving on. Plans of men succeed only when they align with God's will and purpose. So I see things happen and I don't know why. But I know this. If I really believe God is sovereign, I'm not going to go into a panic. I'm not going to go into a meltdown. I'm going to turn my focus to the Lord and I'm going to trust Him. All right? Nothing, whether trivial or great, lies outside God's sovereignty. Whatever it is in your life that's happening, just understand God is sovereign and we can trust Him, okay? All right. I hope I'm not going too fast, but I want to get to where I need to be. All right. No plan of God can be overridden. There's no man in your life, no woman in your life that can override God's will. You have to believe that. Even when it seems like life is out of control, God is in control. If we really believe that He is sovereign. Because God is perfect in love, we trust that His sovereign will is always what? Always good. Is there anything that is not good? And the answer is no. Are there things that are bad that happen? Yes. Things that we want to avoid? Yes. But we have to trust God, don't we? Trust God and do right. All right. Now, the total depravity of man. I hope you'll give me about 10 minutes, maybe 15, to get through this, all right? This is the second essential doctrine that shaped the United States Constitution of those who were of a Puritan biblical background. All right? The total depravity of man. What does that mean? It means this, that man is incapable of governing himself apart from God's law and commandments. So think about that. All right, now, I'll give you, for instance, right now, the movement is still going, not as strong as it was a few years ago, but defund what? Defund the police. The police represent authority, law, and order. Are all police good? No. But as we read Romans chapter 13, it's very clear that those who are in positions of authority have the responsibility of ensuring the safety and the peace of we the people. That is their responsibility before God. So here's the question we ought to be asking. The crowd that wants to defund the police, even movements in New York City to get rid of the police department entirely. Tell me what's going to happen when you get rid of the police department? Anarchy. But anarchy is always the goal of democracy, which is always moving toward majority rule. So let's take Detroit, Hamtramck. Hamtramck is, I think, almost every element of government in Hamtramck now is Muslim. Dearborn? Okay. So almost every element, all the way down, is Muslim. They represent a alliance with the Democratic Party. Now, you won't hear that on television, but they do. Yeah, I call what's happening in America, I call it unholy trinity, okay? You have communism, socialism, you have Islam, which is a political ideology wearing a religious robe. And then third, you have the anarchy of the transsexual, asexual, immoral movement. And so you've got this unholy trinity that is represented in woke and all of these other movements. So when they get in the majority, what do? They do what they recently happened at Dearborn, I guess it was, a county township. They told all the Christians and all the churches to get out. You're not wanted. Publicly, in a council. But that's what happens when we, the people, give the power to people that do not share a biblical world view. All right, moving on. I know some of you probably would love to jump in on some of this. All right, here's another. No man can be trusted with unchecked authority. If Donald Trump were to say today, I'm going to be king, what would we say? Not going to happen. You're not a king. You're a servant. If we could get that back in our mindset as Americans of electing people that are servants, that would change the course of America. Thirdly, human government must have checks and balances and separation of powers. Go back to my illustration. So in our government here, we have the Supreme Court, right? What else do we have? The executive branch, and then the legislative branch. Those are three co-equals. One's not greater than the other. They should be working together under the Constitution. But what we have is a representatives in our government that no longer look to the Constitution for their limits or their boundaries. So let me take you through the depravity of man, and this is going to move fast, so fill in your outline, all right? All right, the doctrine of original sin. Psalm 51, verse 5, David says, in sin did my mother conceive me. From my very conception, my nature was going to be what? A sinner. All right. Secondly, Romans 5:12, wherefore is by one man sin and entered into the world, death by sin, and so death passed upon all men. For that, say it with me, all have sinned. So, every man, woman, boy, and girl is born what? A sinner. What is it that keeps a sinner in check? The law. The law. Now, the law, our law as a nation, is fundamentally based on the Word of God and the commandments. You can very easily see that in the writings of our Constitution. They're not quoting verses, but it's obvious, very present, the philosophy of the men that were shaping what would be our nation. So you begin with the concept every man is a sinner. Secondly, moving on, mankind was created in the image of God for God's pleasure and purpose. So my purpose as a believer is to please God. It is to live my life in such a way that I pursue His purpose and His will for my life. That should be your purpose. Another that goes with that, and I'm skipping through some of this. You have to all the verses are on your outline. You can look them up later. Uh, Thirdly, man was created as a free moral agent, which means what? You have a free will, right? But subject to God's will. Uh, who was it? Frank Sinatra was it saying, "I did it my way." Was that Frank Sinatra? Did I get that right? All right. I did it my way. I hoped he repented of that before he got to the grave, because doing it my way is always a path of sin, right? Why? Because the inclination of the bent of the man's heart is to sin. Adam was created with the capacity to obey or disobey God. When you were conceived and born, you were conceived as a sinner, but you still have a choice of whether to obey or to disobey. Now, what happens when you have a culture that's not taught personal responsibility for lifetime choices? Um, I'm going to move through this. Man is subject to God's will. So if you are a leader, if you are a subject of representing we the people, we long to have men and women in positions of authority that believe that their office is a trust of the people and a responsibility before God. That's why when you go to a court of law, uh, they used to have you put your hand on the Bible. Today they'll have you raise your hand and will you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Recognizing in that statement the authority of God. All right. Another, the fall and universal corruption of sin. The sin permeates our society everywhere. It permeates your family. Um, eh, well, I'm going to move on. I could say some things. I'm not going to do it. All right. Adam's sin was imputed to all humanity. What does that mean? When he sinned, we all sinned in Adam. Why? Because his nature was passed on to us. For if by one man's offense death reigned by one man, much more that they which receive the abundance of grace, the gift of righteousness, shall reign in life by one, Jesus Christ. The offense of one, judgment came upon all men. Another, man sinned and is capable of doing anything to restore himself to God's favor. If somebody says to you, trust me, our attitude should be trust and do what? Trust and verify, right? Um, if we're all honest, we could say, I don't trust you and I don't trust me. I don't trust my nature. Um, Now, and I also have a conscience. Her name is Sheila, that also in my life. But we look at mankind. Let's say a child born in a home, and if that family doesn't instill in that child character traits and understanding and principles and precepts, they're going to raise a child that will be a rebel. Solomon writes, "A child left to himself bringeth what? His mother to shame." And so, what we live in right now in America is a culture that has failed its children, and that failure is 2 and 3 and 4 generations deep now. We we really, I would long to see the public school return to what it was even when I was a kid, you know? But we're so far beyond that now. Another, mankind is thoroughly corrupt. We don't like to say those things, but it's true. There's none that doeth good, no, not one. The wicked are estranged from the womb, from the very womb they are estranged from God. Every imagination of thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The fall and universal judgment. Death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. The wages of sin is death. This is the culture and the principles that we should be teaching people. Uh, you are a sinner. You are inherently corrupt. You're wicked. Well, I'm offended by that. That's because you don't know who you are then. Because the reality is, this is who we are. The doctrine of redemption. Is this my last point before I get to the last one? Let me fill it in real fast, all right? The doctrine of redemption. Uh, just a wonder. I wanted to end with this truth. Again, if you were sitting in a Puritan church, some of what I've taught you today, you would be hearing it. The first is this: in spite of the wickedness, the sinfulness, and the corruptness of man, God promised a redeemer. Genesis 3 Verse 15 goes all the way back to the promise of a Redeemer that is to come, that will bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Speaking of the wicked one. Isaiah 53, he hath borne our griefs. He was wounded for our transgressions. What a wonderful answer we have to sin, isn't it? In Jesus Christ. Christ, the Son of God, is God's Redeemer, the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world. I often think about John the Baptist when he said that, and his understanding in that very moment of who Jesus Christ was. Um, I'm jumping through these verses. You just have to forgive me. Of course, he's the propitiation for our sins. Redemption is by God's grace through faith. Again, a wonderful principle that we often teach here. In fact, we probably teach it every Sunday here at Hillsdale. And then I'm going to just jump quickly to this. We'll pick this up next week. The subservience of government to God's authority. That is the third principle. They believe that every man in authority, it would have been men in authority back then, that their office and their rule was not only subservient to the Constitution of the United States, but particularly to God's authority as well. Anybody comments or thoughts that you've had as we've rushed through this? I hope I'm not leaving you depressed. Nancy, I can't hear you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But sadly, I I don't see that returning, at all. Somebody else. Yeah, Allie? Yeah, right. Anyone else? Yeah, Penny? Yeah, yeah. James, did you raise your hand? Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, because they what they really are doing is undermining the vote of we the people by that. So rather than seeing the electoral college as a balance to the popular vote, they haven't been able to do away with it. And so what they have started doing is trying to erode it, sadly. And it's only a matter of time, isn't it? Yeah, Darlene. You probably know all this, right? No? Well, uh, there's a lot of things more we could say, but I appreciate you. I want you to understand, I'm not up here ranting or raving about Republican versus Democrat. I have no interest in that. But I do want you to know the philosophy that's driving the bus over here and that it's very serious. The Revolutionary War was fought and we won our freedom, but it was in 1787 that it secured our liberty. And we're watching in the political establishments now the erosion of our republic like we've never seen before. And if we don't recognize the evil represented by the Democratic Socialist Party, they are evil. I'm saying that unapologetically. I do not think you can vote Democrat and not think that you're voting for evil, because they stand for everything that is anti-Bible, everything that is anti-Christian. They hate you. You do understand that as Bible believers, they hate you. They want to silence you. They want to squelch you, and somehow we've got to communicate. So my purpose, Darlene, in teaching this is that I want these people here to be able to be out in the public forum and to speak truth, to speak it in love, but to speak truth because they don't know what they don't know out there, and that's the danger